Hey, everybody. This is Susan Eichhorst. I'm a physician assistant here at Basana Health and Wellness. Really appreciate you joining in today, and we're going to continue our webinar series. I have done a previous webinar on food as medicine. I've done one about fake food and real food versus real food, and it came to my attention that it would be helpful to do something that talked about labeling and how to decipher labels and get the most information out of them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We will start with just through the ages. We have been labeling food since humanity started baking bread, evidently. The ancient Romans used stamps to mark where the bread was made. I suspect some of this was for to make sure that the right person got the credit for it, but also if somebody got sick, they also knew how to find the person that either poisoned it or made it bad. And then in the 1400s, we started seeing labeling on wine, showing where it was a place of origin, more than likely under the same assumptions that people that were making good quality local wine wanted to make sure that that was well marked. And that has continued on until here in the United States in the 1850s, we started doing food labeling really to protect the public from foodborne illnesses and outbreaks and ultimately death. In 1862, President Lincoln established the USDA. The USDA was created really to create some strict guidelines for food handling and preparation and processing. This was the only established U.S. department at that point. Up until 1906, the government let states regulate their own food packaging and handling and processing. But by 1906, the Food and Drug Administration was established through the Food and Drug Act. And this was really because now we were starting to see more interstate commerce. People were traveling more. There were more ways to get food across state lines, and the commerce started to grow. So we did have to have better guidance on food that was being sold. Up until the 60s, a lot of this wasn't a lot of problems. Most women, families made food in their own home or bought very locally from farms. So it really wasn't until the 60s that things started to change and women started working outside the home more. We needed more prepared foods, and there was more of a demand for pre-prepared foods. So in USDA mandates started popping up that we needed to list ingredients that were in the food to be placed on all prepared food products. And this continued on as the only mandate until 1990 when the FDA brought in Nutrition Labeling and Education Act. This mandated the labels that we're most familiar with now, the ones that do have your fat, cholesterol, calories, sodium, etc. And here I just pulled up two illustrations of these labels. The one on the left is for a regular peanut butter that comes from Jif. It does have all your traditional fats, cholesterol, sodium, and then underneath that is the ingredients list. And I do just want to point out, because next to it on the right is the organic Santa Cruz peanut butter. If you look at the Jif, first of all, just looking at the nutritional facts, Jif has less fat than the organic peanut butter, 12 grams of fat versus 17 grams of fat. It's got the same amount of saturated fat, but many people are going to go towards Jif because it has less fat. They also will notice that both of these have no cholesterol, but when you look at the sodium content, Jif has 250 milligrams of sodium versus the Santa Cruz only has 50. Again, on the plus side, Jif has a little more protein at 8 grams per serving versus 7 grams. I think the biggest thing that's really important here is the ingredients, though, because when you look down to the ingredients, I'm going to start with the organic one. The Santa Cruz creamy peanut has pretty much only peanuts as its ingredient. So organic, it's a little fuzzy down here for those that can see that. Organic roasted peanuts, and then next to that contains 1% or less of salt. That's all that's in this product. That's how you make peanut butter. Put it in a blender, blend it up until it's all blended. You have oil, you have peanuts, you've got peanut butter. If you look at the Jif, they do have peanuts as their primary ingredient. That's always the first one, and they go down in descending order of content, quantity in the product. The next one is corn syrup, solids followed by sugar. Then we get a soy protein followed by hydrogenated vegetable oils. So this really out the chute is already not a great product. And then you get down to things like niacinamide and folic acid, which are not good products for, especially the folic acid for people that have an MTHFR gene mutation. And then it's got a little bit of zinc oxide in it. best that I know of zinc oxide. That's what's in sunscreen and what our lifeguards wear, all that white stuff. So I'm not sure why that's in the peanut butter. So really these labels can be very helpful to delineate what things are, but really looking at the whole picture and not just, oh, this has less fat. That's where a lot of people get confused with labeling. So really want to start with some basic things to talk about. So food allergies. I personally think this is one of the most major reasons on why we do have food labeling. I am highly allergic to some milk products, and I can have some real skin ramifications from that. Fortunately, I don't have anaphylactic shock, but upwards around 2% of the adult population will have a serious enough food allergy that we will end up in the emergency room or hospitalized. So 2% of adults, 4 to 8% of children have a major food allergy. And so it's very helpful to have these labels let us know what's in them. As I said, 30,000 ER visits, 2,000 hospitalizations, and 150 deaths per year just from food allergy complications. In 2004, the Food Allergen Labeling Consumer Protection Act was passed. This identified the major allergens, which account for the majority of the severe allergy reactions out there. Milk, eggs, fish, particularly flounder and cod, shellfish, tree nuts, wheat, peanuts, soybeans. Those are the guys that get the major attention. And that is a priority on why we need to have food labeling. The law requires that on these labels, the food source be identified in parentheses next to the ingredients. So if you're looking at something that has flour in it, it has to say where that flour comes from. If it's wheat, is it coconut flour? Is it primarily those? Lecithin gets a little confusion. So now that has to say that there is derived from soy or from wherever it is. Or the label has to say next to the ingredient contains list, and it will specifically say what those food products are after the ingredients. It can also have just a notation of may contain or produced in a facility. And these are really with respect to especially gluten-free products. Many of those are processed in manufacturing food processing plants that also process wheat and corn. And there's a lot of reactivity between wheat and corn. So people that are celiac specifically should probably avoid many corn products, especially here in the United States, because there's a high cross reactivity between corn and wheat. And so those are very important to have on a label. I just brought this up, food allergies with respect to sesame, because if you do have a sesame allergy or sensitivity, I'm sure this is like this for many other products, but because these are not recognized as a severe allergen, according to this 2004 Food Act, these must be listed if it's part of the product as in tahini. And tahini is kind of a butter from sesames. So that is the primary product. However, if sesame is used as a spice or a flavor, they do not have to include that sesame is in there. I will reiterate this again, but anything that says natural flavor does not have to tell you what that flavor is really about. So gluten-free, I think this is also another very important aspect of food labeling. The gluten-free designation is really specific to the FDA, and these specifications came about in 2013 and again in August of 2020 when they were revamped. A product can meet all of the requirements to make it gluten-free according to the FDA. They can then make a voluntary claim that it's a gluten-free product. So to achieve that, they have to prove that their product has less than 20 parts per million of gluten within it. So these products may not really be truly gluten-free, but they are so low that it's hard to measure anything less than that. And that becomes our gluten-free product. This can be a little dicey for some celiacs because some celiacs are a lot more sensitive to their gluten allergy than others, or they don't know where they're getting that gluten because it really could be part of something that is just so insignificant that it still becomes part of this gluten-free. But I think that one of the more important things is that if it says gluten-free, at least you can be assured that it has no wheat, no rye, no barley, and no crossbreeds of these grains that can be derived from those. And that's with or without them having the gluten removed, but always be aware. So again, starting with the basics, probably the easiest thing that any of us can do is find things that are processed and packaged that have less than 5 ingredients in them. And preferable if a 5th grader can easily pronounce all of those ingredients. You cannot go wrong with things that are nice and simple. You want to look for products that have more food products than chemical names if that's what you've got to buy. Look for things that don't have added sugar. Many products just add sugar on for taste, for more sweetness, and that is really what's sabotaging our health system. We want something that has more protein than sugar. And then again, always avoid natural flavors or fragrance because there is zero regulation on those products. They can really put or sneak anything into that and use that as the label of natural flavors. So also in the basic category for me is this whole idea of organic. According to the USDA, they have 4 listings for organic products. So they have 100% organic, and this means every single thing in there is organic with the exception of water or salt. This can be assured, they can be traced back to where these products came from. There's a whole processing chain that can be connected to that product to prove that all those products were grown on organic soil or animals raised in only an organic manner. And then we get the organic, which is 95% organic content by weight. So not quite all organic, but organic enough to call it organic. We then go a little bit lower into the made with organic ingredients. And here we have 70% of the product by weight is organic. And then lastly, specific organic ingredients, and they will be listed separately as organic, organic, whatever. Organic meats, they do help us rest assured that there are no antibiotics or growth hormones. The meat that is listed as organic will say that it's that they've been fed only non-GMO organic feed. There's never been any synthetic or sewage sludge fertilizer on this feed. If you don't know about sewage sludge fertilizer, I don't care to talk about it here, but I think that's a very disturbing and interesting concept that we have used in farming, and I encourage you to look that up on your own. We then go to with organic meats, it assures that animal is grass-fed for at least 4 months of its life, but it may be grain-fed or corn-fed as long as those products are organic. So it does not assure that it's 100% grass-fed beef, which is really the gold standard for health. What organic meat also does is it assures that there is no pink slime or what is termed lean, finely textured beef. If you look at my Real Food, Fake Food webinar, I talk a little bit more about pink slime. This is something that is a product of kind of what's left on the bones. It is cleaned in ammonia. It is FDA approved to be used in our food system. Canada does not use it, and the European countries do not allow this and actually name it as not consumable by humans is how they term pink slime. But at least in your organic meats, you can be rest assured pink slime is not in there. So what are the best proteins? When you're looking for protein, I think that this is one of the more important things for us to be really mindful for. This is where you do want to spend your money. You want to buy 100% grass-fed beef. This assures it's grass-fed and it's grass finished before it goes to harvest. You want to look for pasture-raised poultry, eggs, and pork. These have never been fed anything but what these animals eat in nature. They're not fed grains. They are kind of left to their own devices to choose what they want to eat. Wild caught fish is preferable, and you can also find great certified humane, which shows that the standards for raising these animals is very high. With respect to eggs, this gets very confusing for a lot of people. Cage-free, range-free, pasture-raised. I'm always going to pasture-raised. That's the only eggs I buy, but cage-free and range-free are certainly out there as well. Cage-free hens, they're able to move around horizontally or from tier to tier within their house. They have access to fresh food and water, but they really don't have any space requirements that they have to be within. They have to have enough of a scratch area, perches, and nests that they can kind of move around, but they still can be in very small confinements. And it really doesn't have a lot to do with what they're fed. Free range have access to the outside during their laying cycle, but again, still this is quite limited, and really restrictions are not, or requirements are not as strict for these. With pasture-raised eggs, they actually have to be in an actual pasture with living vegetation for at least 6 hours of each day per the Humane Society. And they're designated through the Humane Farm Animal Care Act, and it is certified humane program. So pasture-raised eggs really will have a specific designation on them. They do cost a little bit more, but pasture-raised eggs have a darker yolk where there's more of the nutrients. They contain 10 times the omega-3 fatty acids and vitamins versus commercially raised eggs. They have 5 times more vitamin D, 3 times more vitamin E. Taste differently. There is no doubt about it. Getting to seafood, I briefly talked about wild versus wild caught. So wild versus farmed. If you're going to buy farmed fish, the only fish that I really see recommended that's farmed is salmon from Norway. Now, more and more countries will get better about their farmed habits, but Norway to date has the highest standards. Norwegian farmed fish is highly, highly regulated. They do not use pesticides. They really keep their bins very dispersed so that these animals are not stressed. And they do come up as a good option for a farmed salmon and fish. But otherwise, you really would like to go out of your way to find a wild caught fish. You don't want to eat fish from Chile. It has very poor standards and enforcement. They do not really care what's happening. And regrettably, even if we have some of these, our own companies, even overseas, the US does a really poor job of doing extensive inspection at arrival. So we may send an inspector out to a plant somewhere that we're importing from, but we have to give them time to know that we're coming. That gives time to clean things up. And if we don't do our due diligence on the state side, then these foods can come in and we're not even checking for them and seeing what their quality is. The sustainable fish populations, when it's sustainable, that really means that they are replenishing the population over time. So they're not just going out and culling all these fish out of the ocean. If you have some interest in it, I really highly recommend you look at the documentary Seaspiracy. It really gives a good overview of what's happening in our fishing industry worldwide and just how much we're decimating the oceans with the way we currently fish for fish. So you do want to find something that's sustainable. So organic protein, again, I think this may be a repeat. No GMO feed, no pink slime, certified humane, does not mean no grains. And lastly, what I do like on this slide, something that I had learned through going through this and preparing for this talk is about blade tenderizing. So this is something that I had not noticed on a label before, but also I buy 100% restorative grass-fed meat from a farm. So I don't have labels like that. But if you go to Costco and you buy a big, let's say a tenderloin, a beef tenderloin, very expensive piece of meat, frequently cooked medium rare to medium. It's not uncommon, and there's no reason to do this to that piece of meat, but there is a technique called blade tenderizing. And when they blade tenderizing, just what it sounds like, this blade is going through the meat, already kind of breaking up the tissue so that it'll be more tender. The problem with that in a high quality piece of meat is frequently we do not cook that to temperature. So that blade is going through raw meat over and over and over again. That is not sterile. So it is actually introducing bacteria deep within that piece of meat. If I'm going to take that piece of meat and stew it, and cook it all over a long period of time in my slow cooker or a stew, that's different. All of that meat is going to cook, and that blade tenderizing is not going to compromise my health. But if I take that in a fillet, again, not a necessary thing to do in a fillet, but in some kind of a steak, and I cook it to medium rare, that is not going to kill any bacteria that may have been introduced. So do be very careful about blade tenderized meat, and know that that is something you want to cook thoroughly. I would say one of the best advice that I got through taking or preparing for this talk is really ignore what's on the front of the package. It may say anything. That's marketing. It can say organic and it's going to get your attention, but only 2 things are organic in there. So that's why it can put that label on the front. So don't trust the marketing on the front of the label. Go straight to the back so that you can learn a little bit more about that. So I want to start off with artificial colors. These things are just pervasive in our processed foods. You know, there's a lot of contention and confusion about artificial colors. They go back and forth that I have found in some of the reports that I was reading. Some say, yeah, not so bad. They only, they only cause that in really high amounts. And I think that is the problem. Generally recognized as safe is a term that the FDA, take it back, the USDA. And usually that does mean that this is fine if you don't eat a ton of it. Well, if my child is eating, Lucky Charms every day, and well, shame on me, but that's pretty typical in our world, then they're getting these continuously every single day. and then add on some Skittles or some M&Ms or anything else that has color in it. So we really do want to keep being mindful for what are these dyes that we're putting in our food. We know that red dye number 3 has induced cancer in animal studies, including thyroid cancer, and also results in some chromosomal damage. And according to this little picture, the FDA actually said it's one of the greatest public health concerns is red dye number 3. Red dye number 40 is on that list, yellow dye 6 and 5, blue number 1, a lot of allergic reactions, also hyperactivity for all of these, carcinogenic, bladder and testes tumors with green number 3. So these are foods I really don't want to feed my children, and why am I eating them myself? There are lots of alternatives for food coloring. This is a great illustration of just pictures and how, saffron, turmeric, carotenoids, and paprika, all of these can kind of give our yellows and our oranges. So there are definitely options for natural food coloring. And I know those of you listening on a podcast can't see these illustrations, but here's a picture of 2 little piles of M&Ms. They are both marked and they both have M's on them. So we know that they are presumably M&Ms. The ones on the left, there's 2 yellow, 2 orange, a green, a brown, and a blue, and then pretty much the same picture on the other side. The ones on the left are American M&Ms. The ones on the right are European M&Ms. The European M&Ms have only natural colors. They don't look really any different than what we're selling here. It's just weird. The next thing to look at on the back of the package is preservatives. Preservatives. They are just abundant. Obviously, we need preservatives for our food. There's no doubt about it. We've been preserving food pretty much as long as we have been farming, since 12,000 BC. So initially we started sun drying, and we all know that can really, take all the moisture out of that, reduces the bacterial growth, also reduces the size for easier storing. By 500 BC, we were making jams, another way to preserve our fruits. By the late 17 and through early 1900s, we developed refrigeration, canning, dehydration, vacuum packing, irradiation, and we started adding chemicals. By 1980s, we had really discovered how to process seed oils, and they became very cheap, which also then became very useful in increasing shelf life, which was less waste and cost to the manufacturer, but also cheaper, and without really any concern for what's it doing to us. So the preservatives that we want to watch out for, they are the hydrogenated oils, monosodium glutamate, that's a little questionable, sodium phosphates, Carrageenan, sodium nitrates, and nitrites. These are kind of the big guys that you will see repeatedly. Everything I continue to learn from the experts I feel have the most to say about staying healthy, how to rebuild these bodies that we have, is really to get rid of hydrogenated seed oils. These things are bad play actors. They have soybean, canola, sunflower, safflower. Those are probably the most, and corn. I think that's Mazola. These are infused with hydrogen. They make them very creamy in texture, so they work out very well for pastries, snacks. They also improve shelf life. However, our oils and our fats are what make up our cell membranes. And when we talk about our cells, and I'm just going to show this little picture because I just think it's so cool. But here's a photo of a cell. When you look at this membrane right here, this is what separates the cell in here where all the magic happens. Here's where you make your energy from the outside world. So these are receptors. My hormone patients all hear me talk about the receptors and how the hormones fit in the receptors and turn on the cell. But if this cell membrane and these receptors are made from bad fats, they probably are not very receptive. They may not preserve what is inside the cell, and they are persistent. They can stay around for a very long time in our system. So we really want to start getting rid of them. And that is frequently what's in these processed products. This is the worst fat you can eat. They're horrible. They raise our LDL, they lower our HDL. They're just very highly full of omega-6 fatty acids, which are highly inflammatory. So we really want to get these out of our lives. Where it gets a little dicey and confusing is the cold pressed or expeller pressed options for these oils, and they honestly are preferable. So if you do find a product that has a cold press or expelled press canola oil, and usually it's not canola, it's usually more sunflower oil or safflower oil. Those are the most common, but I do see canola as well. These are preferable. The cold press actually is the first press of the seed, and it uses a lot less heat. Once they do an expeller process, then you need to increase the heat. And that's part of the problem, is that makes these more highly inflammatory. It also says that if you're going to cook with one of these oils, that you would you're best with a expeller, because it is more tolerant to heat. I am not a fan of using these oils for cooking. I really think that the science is pretty strong for using something like olive oil, avocado oil, grass-fed butter, ghee, which is clarified butter. It has the milk solids out of it. So people like myself that have milk allergies can tolerate ghee, and even lard. I mean, all these products got such bad raps during the 70s when the sugar industry came in and promoted a low-fat diet, and really our world kind of turned around. But it's probably best to just keep trying to put these in very, very low moderation in your diet and work on the other oils so that you can continue to build better cells. MSG. This one's a little confusing. So monosodium glutamate, or sodium glutamate, is a really popular seasoning and flavor enhancer. It's derived from a naturally occurring amino acid called L-glutamic acid. It's naturally found in some foods. So tomatoes have some MSG in them, mushrooms, kelp, cheeses. But this was also developed in a laboratory in Japan in the early 1900s. And a biochemist who is still, I think that he's not, but his name is still on the major company that makes most of the MSG in Japan, and I understand now in the United States, in Iowa. It was developed as a flavor enhancer, and as these quotes say, MSG balances, blends, and rounds the perception of other tastes. So this is what makes up the umami taste in Japanese cuisine. Interestingly, though, numerous side effects have been reported with MSG, headaches and hypertension being the two most notorious of them. But even blinded studies really didn't show a very strong correlation with this. I did not deep dive far enough, but I am kind of curious to know where those studies were based. Were they mostly based in Japan on that form of MSG? Because the Japanese MSG is actually derived through bacterial fermentation of cane sugar, beets, or corn. Here in the United States, our MSG is all of it, but the majority of it is made in Iowa, which would be using GMO corn. I don't know if that makes a difference. That might, because there may be something in the pesticides, the herbicides, something else that gets in this MSG. It is classified by the FDA as generally recognized as safe, but I will say if somebody does have a reaction to MSG, it's just best to avoid it. You can ask any Asian restaurant to cook without it. Curiously, one of the things that was found in some of these studies was MSG got a kind of a derogatory name to it, and I think it's Chinese syndrome, Chinese disease, Chinese food syndrome, I think. But when the researchers went out and looked at Thai food, Korean food, Japanese food, all of these cultures use MSG, and it's not, exclusive to a Chinese restaurant. So they didn't find the same complaints. People weren't complaining the same, even though the food is very similar. So that's where a lot of this curiosity comes from. How harmful is it? I would say, if you have a reaction to monosodium glutamate, avoid it. Otherwise, just kind of see how you feel with it. Sodium phosphate. So phosphorus is a mineral that is naturally found in protein-rich foods, so dairy, fish, eggs, meat. And phosphorus is very important for our kidney, our muscle tone, function, bone health. Phosphorus is different than phosphate. Phosphate is the inorganic form of phosphorus, and this is what's used as a preservative in our processed foods. It's used as a thickening agent, a curing agent for meats, an emulsifier to stabilize oil and water when it's processed in cheese, and it helps extend shelf life. When we talk about phosphorus, bodies absorb about 50 to 60% of the naturally occurring phosphorus in our foods, but it absorbs 90% of the man-made phosphorus. So this can put us in too much of a phosphorus state of phosphate, and that can be problematic, especially if you have kidney disease. And there are a number of people out there that have kidney disease and have no idea they do. Kidney disease is frequently fairly silent. Our kidneys don't put off warning signs usually that they are failing. They aren't a real high pain threshold organ. So unless your kidney is blocked with a stone or a tumor and it's not draining urine, your body will not necessarily notice that it's not filtering appropriately, and you could be going into kidney failure. So you can have some kidney disease and not know it, be on a high sodium phosphate, a diet rather that has a high amount of sodium phosphate in it for preservatives, and that's increasing your risk. And that's why some of these things are so cautionary, is because we don't always know what's going on underlying. And again, this generally recognized as safe frequently doesn't mean such high levels that it's in overload. So the Environmental Working Group, or this EWG group, that's who comes out with the Dirty Dozen list every year. They really are a great watchdog for chemicals in our world. They feel that monosodium glutamate is more of a moderate concern. Carrageenan. So carrageenan is something that I just learned about a couple of years ago because I was drinking almond milk, thought I was buying a better quality of it, and not the case. So I started looking at labels and realizing, well, what is in this stuff? Well, carrageenan really has no nutritional value. It's essentially used as the emulsifier to kind of keep the almond milk, in this case, in more of a suspension. But it is also found in yogurt, tofu, dairy and non-dairy alternatives, and even baby food. You know, it's extracted from seaweed, also known as Irish moss, and it can be labeled natural. So you kind of have to be careful with how the wording is on some of these labels. I think carrageenan, the one major problem with this is really the GI upset from it. So this can really lead into inflammatory gut, intestines, and can be really problematic for our kids' tummies. That's where some of this really comes in, is my kid have diarrhea and GI tummy aches because of this product in their almond milk. That is a definite possibility. So some better choices especially for these emulsifiers, are the gums. Most of them are really considered safe in low doses, although most of them also cause some GI distress with bloating and diarrhea. The bloating is really a thing that I think most people, they think about that with food, but mostly raw vegetables, but it can be some of these other little insidious preservatives that just kind of come and go out of our lives. And that sets up for this GI distress that most people can't put together with the food because it's so intertwined in their food. The thing that I've learned that was pretty interesting to me was this xanthan gum. And that xanthan gum is really derived from wheat or corn. And since they're in the United States, since there's such cross-reactivity between corn and wheat, many celiac experts say, most celiacs probably shouldn't eat corn unless they know where that corn was grown and they are eating it off the cob. But if they're eating corn processed products, probably not your best bet, because it probably has a cross-reactivity with wheat, and celiacs don't tolerate the gluten in wheat. So just be known that xanthan gum is probably not our best choice there. Nitrates and nitrites. These are preservatives that, again, these are naturally found in many vegetables, and really overall, they're kind of beneficial for us. They get a bad rap when they're added to meats, such as bacon, ham, sausage, hot dogs, because first we add them really to prevent bacterial overgrowth, add a saltier taste, and it improves the meat's appearance because it turns the pink more meat, so that meat, as it ages, doesn't start to get that kind of gray, unpleasant color that meat tends to turn. But so nitrates themselves are fairly inert and harmless. However, when we chew the food and when it gets into our stomach, our own enzymes start to convert these nitrates into nitrites. Nitrites can be beneficial, but they can also be harmful depending on what they develop into. So nitrites are beneficial when they convert over into nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a great muscle or relaxant. It actually allows for more blood flow, has been helpful in reducing hypertension, can be beneficial for a number of cell functions. But these nitrites are harmful when they are converted over to nitrosamines. So the nitrosamines are particles that are found also in tobacco smoke, and nitrates or nitrites, when they're heated at high temps, which is how we cook most of these foods, as in grilling, that's where they become problematic. So we really do want to keep looking for, how do I find nitrate free lunch meat, and they do have them. You do have to go out of your way to look for them. You can find things like that at natural grocers. Certainly Whole Foods, I'm sure, has some, but Whole Foods also will have other products that may not be quite as clean. I just want to turn to general chemicals. Chemicals are really used in our cleaning products, our personal care products, and in cosmetics. Good rule of thumb, avoid any sprays that can easily be inhaled. But I'm going to go into a little bit with this with respect to cleaning supplies, but I do want people to really know we all need to be mindful about what we're putting on our body. You know, we shampoo and condition our hair. That's around, you're inhaling that the rest of the day. It's on your scalp. It's getting absorbed through your scalp. The cosmetics that we put on in our facial products, our everyday products, all of those are, if they're placed on our skin, they're getting absorbed. And over time, that can be a problem if I'm sensitive to that. So I've really gotten out of using cosmetics that are not either, I get them through the office here, that I know that they're a professional grade, but I also like the Beauty Counter brand because they've already vetted their products for over 1,500 chemicals that they do not allow in their products. So you can be rest assured that you're putting good quality products on your face and body and not causing yourself harm. But I did want to go back and talk about things that I really think are super important for us to continue to know and understand. Fragrance, that's a big one. Try to avoid anything that just says fragrance at all costs. You know, really, there's, at least to date, there's no regulation on these things. They can say natural fragrance. They can just put fragrance down and they don't have to disclose those ingredients. They really can have anything in there. And frequently they contain a molecule called phthalate. So phthalates are chemicals that can be used in to make plastics, but we also use phthalates in things that are fragranced. So our cleaning products and our cosmetic products, deodorant, toys, dish soap, anything that may have some kind of a fragrance in it. Phthalates disrupt hormones. They also disrupt reproductive cycles and can be carcinogenic. This whole disrupt hormones thing is really near and dear to my heart because I am a hormone specialist and I am frequently helping my patients understand that your hormones are probably stable. Your pellets, they release at pretty much the same rate. They have a steady state to them. But what's happening that's contributing to how they're working? Am I living in this highly fragranced world? Do I have too many chemicals in my world? They can literally block up the receptors where the hormones fit. They can inhibit the hormones from getting into the receptor by binding them up with these molecules. They can also then lead to more damaging cells down the line and can become carcinogenic. So you really just want to be cautious with fragrance because you don't know what's in the fragrance. There's another chemical that's used pretty widely, this 2-BE, 2-butoxyethanol. This is used in hair dyes, nail polish remover, glass cleaners, laundry stain removers, oven cleaners. It's pretty ubiquitous. It's kind of everywhere. So, and I forgot to write why we don't want that, but there's a reason. Sorry, I don't remember what it is, but we don't want it in there. Sodium laurate sulfate, or SLS, and then there's a second one that's sodium laureth sulfate, SLES. They are both used as surfactants. They remove oils and dirts from surfaces, and they also make kind of a foamy leather. So you're going to see those in dish soaps, laundry detergents, those Tilettes. I don't love those because you got to throw that thing out. That's just more in the landfill. Toilet bowl cleaners, so anything that gets a little foamy. These are highly toxic to our aquatic life. They can also cause skin and eye irritations, but we need to go back to that aquatic. If we destroy our oceans any more than we are, we're really in a detriment, and those are going to be harder and harder to come back. So as I'm cleaning my laundry and all of that goes into our water, that's why this is such a problem as well, not just our own skin and eyes. Phosphates, again, they can get their environmental hazard as well. They do cause these algae blooms, which then increase weed growth. Those things reduce oxygen, which reduces aquatic life. And coal tar is also known by a couple of letters that most people would never put together, FD&C and DNC. These can be listed as ingredients, naphtha, ester. These are all carcinogenic and really do not belong in our cleaning products if I'm cleaning and breathing those. So what are some good options? So Branch Basics, I honestly have not tried this product yet, but it's come up on a number of people that I highly regard, and I am ready to try them. I've been using 7th generation. I don't love some of their fragrances, how they actually smell. And I'm not positive I love how they like my dishwasher detergent. So I am ready to try something else. So I'm going to try Branch Basics. I'm kind of a firm believer in baking soda and vinegar. And for most of our households, we're not so horribly terrible toxic. We just need to get rid of some grime. So that is a great option for cleaning. And then just another one, avoid the laundry detergent that has the fragrance in it. You're cleaning in it, and then you are sleeping in that. You are living in it all day. You are in this fragrance. You never get away from it if it's in your clothes. So I'd like to close with a couple of resources. I know this is just really a cursory kind of go over, but there's a few resources that I find that I really love to go back to. And this Bobby Parrish he's a chef. He may be a home cook, but he cooks. That's probably on Instagram, but I catch him on Facebook. It's called Flav City. He's out of Chicago, my hometown, so that always kind of endears me. But what I like about Bobby is he'll take us into the grocery stores and really do a comparison. Here's the ingredient list over here. Here's a better option for you. He's constantly doing this with all sorts of products. He does some shows that have him cooking. He does some good replacement in his foods. So I think he's a great resource to have on a social media feed. And the same with the Food Babe. She is very holistic. She's frequently talking about different products, things that come up, why we want to avoid these in our diet, in our lifestyle, in our environment. Those are two great resources, along with Dr. Livingood, my favorite Jill Carnahan, Mark Hyman, and then Dave Asprey, who's the Bulletproof Coffee guy. All of these have got something to really share and are all easily available on social media. And then what are some takeaways for today? So buyer beware. I realize that these are labeled. Those labels are there to protect us. But if you don't know what these things mean, it's hard to be protected. So keep going back to your basics. How much is in here? Can I pronounce these things? Are these real foods? I think that's the real take home here. But I also really want people to keep cleaning up your personal environment. Every time you buy a new product, think about, what is this bringing into your home? Is this one more thing you want? How many chemicals are in here? How do I reduce plastic? Can I buy this peanut butter in a glass jar instead of a plastic jar? Not only is the plastic leaching into the food, but you've got to do something with it when it's done. Very little of our plastic gets recycled. I don't just mean people don't put it in their bins. That's a problem too. But once it's in the recycling bin, there's not a lot to do with these plastics unless we make more products from them. So if we just reduce that by taking that out, we are also better in our food system by using glass. And I mean that from also storing your food at home and certainly cooking it in a microwave. Get away from keeping it in a plastic Tupperware. You are eating that plastic. There is no two ways around it. The heat leaches it into your food. You are eating plastic. So keep working on, how do I clean up my own world? Because you can't avoid it out there. I always say, I have a convertible and I can do nothing or very little when the top's down and I'm behind a diesel truck. But I know when I'm at home, my house is not toxic. And then as your economics allow, and I know this is a really tough time, we're going through so much inflation, prices are terrible, food prices are horrible, but please remember, this is the only body you get. One of my younger patients said to me one time, it dawned on me looking at my mom that this is my retirement body and I want to make sure I get to use it well. That really hit home. And she was in her 30s. So I was like, yes, keep upgrading your food quality. Keep buying better proteins. Get better fats in your diet. When you can afford it, keep upgrading. This is your body you're getting to build. So be mindful and choose very wisely, because really in the end, you get to build a better body. And you get to do that every day by making a better choice. I'm so glad you joined me. I hope you have a great day. I hope this was helpful. We'll see you again here at Basana Health and Wellness. Thanks.